morning, good morning.
Good morning.
So here's Avenue C between 8th and 9th Street. And Mary Spinku ran People's Mutual for years, loved safety blue. So this is, when you go around the neighborhood, you see blue fire escapes and the handrails blue. That's one of our buildings, one of People's buildings. So look at this handrail and you see how high up the water got. And that's that handrail there. This is 134, 136 Avenue C. Two buildings next door to each other on one heating system. Got renovated in the 80s. New heating system with circulating hot water. And it's got one of those basements where you walk around in, it's about this tall. And so the boiler's down in a pit. One of the reasons boilers are in pits is that they used to need to be tall so there would be space for the ashes to fall down under the coal grates. And they needed to be at a low point so the condensate, after the steam and the radiators turn to water, the condensate comes back down. And that's still a lot of the reason why we put boilers in basements. There's three really good reasons to put boilers in basements. One is, of course, so the coal can slide down the delivery chute. Another is so that after the steam condenses, it can come back to the boiler by gravity. And the third, probably the most important reason, is so that the chimney is tall enough to pull a strong enough draft to pull air through the boiler if you can't use a fan because your city has not yet been wired for electricity. Since none of these reasons still apply, we should ask why, when the building got renovated, was the boiler put in the basement, in a pit no less. So this boiler, here's the pit, and whenever you go in a boiler room and you see a moat built around the sides, this little wall that was built, that's a clue. You can look there and read the history of what's been happening to this poor boiler. In this case, it gets flooded really often. You see the pipe down here is all corroded. Over here it's not, but here it's all corroded from getting wet repeatedly. And you can see the gas valves are raised up above what's usually the water level. Normally they come stuck out the side of the burner at this level, but we repiped them up here after one of the floods. This boiler floods every year or so, just because it's down low. So our ambition is to have this be the first building where we move the boiler room to the roof. We talked to the structural people and this, and so it's probably going to happen in this building first of any. Because it's hot water heat, the system doesn't care where the boiler is located. Steam would be a whole nother challenge to put that on the roof. It's been done, but it's harder. This is the elevator machine room in a building around the corner, 334 East 8th Street. It has a hydraulic elevator. It's a hydraulic elevator is the kind with a piston. Hydraulic is Greek or Roman or something for hydro, water. But instead of pumping water up a piston, it's oil, because the water would rust the piston. So the problem with oil is that it's biodegradable. Bacteria would eat it if you didn't put inhibitors in there. So this tank is a big bathtub basically filled with oil, and it's got a sump pump in there. It's a $10,000 sump pump equivalent, and it pumps oil under pressure. It's submersible, and oil goes under pressure in this pipe to the piston and pushes the elevator up. The elevator's across the hall, like 10, 12 feet away from here. So this machine could be anywhere. And the paneled or wires could be anywhere. It could be on the first floor, could be on the roof, could be in the building next door. But it's in the basement, low down. And the inhibitors mixed with the oil, think about it. Imagine you're some bacteria. You're going along and you see this oil. It's exposed to air, so it absorbs right about the right amount of water vapor. It's got right about the right amount of oxygen. Because there's this motor and pump pushing it around, it's a little bit heated, you know, biological activity increases with temperature increase. So I think Agent Orange, when I think what they put in here to keep bacteria from eating it, it can sit there 20, 30 years and the bacteria doesn't touch it. Now, nobody's ever told me what's in there. I know it's something with a really long name. But what happened in the flood is the water came up to about this high. So the oil from the hydraulic elevator reservoir mixed with the water in the flood. So we're down in this basement. We've got all the doors open to keep the relative humidity in the air too low for mold to grow, which was successful. The ceilings and almost all the walls, we didn't change the gypsum board. Picture all the buildings got flooded, almost no gypsum board changed, all the ceilings stayed. At the end is the handout here with an article about some of People's Mutual buildings, and there's on the back there's some little blurbs about how to deal with your boilers after a flood and how to keep the building from getting moldy. So all the doors are open to keep the relative humidity low, but of course it's cold. There's no lights. So we're walking around in this basement with flashlights, and it's cold, and every surface is coated with a mixture of oil and water, like salad dressing, right? And so we're walking like this, like that way you walk that you know it's kind of slippery there, right? And then the electricians were scared to pull wires. They were putting temp, like to bring power up to the apartments, but they didn't want to, the boiler room, everything was so we pull our own temp wires. So picture there's all these spools of wire we bought, and it's all laying on the floor, and we're pulling, and it's on the floor getting soaked with the oil and water mixture, and then we're strapping it to the ceiling, and we're working, and that's what we were dealing with. And of course the people in the building didn't have an elevator for many weeks. So one thing that would be good is to raise this up a few feet. And this panel's a couple feet off the ceiling. It will be good when you put this back, put it up higher. What's even more better would be to put it up a floor. Find a little space behind the mailboxes or somewhere to put at least the electronics or maybe the reservoir. Peoples does share the management responsibilities for a supportive housing building on 6th Street, B and C. And that building has an elevator that goes all the way to the basement, but the hydraulic reservoir is one flight up. So after the power came on, they just turned it on and it operated. That's it. It's very boring, non-event. So here's the boiler room in that same building. This is when we walked in, and that's a row of 4 boilers, and that's the expansion tank, and that's these 2 green things are the pumps that pump water around to the heaters in the buildings, and over to the right out of the picture are 2 big water heaters. This expansion tank is normally filled all the way or most of the way with air. The purpose of the expansion tank is it's used not in a steam system, but they're used in heating systems where hot water circulates around the building. And picture you have all this pipe all around the building and the boiler, and it's all this loop with a pump circulating that comes around to the boiler, gets hot, goes around to the apartments, heats the apartment, comes back cooler, goes back in a loop. And it's the same water again and again, closed loop. And in October, the heat timer says, oh, it's cold out, turn on the fire. And the water warms up, so when it warms up, it gets bigger, and it has to have somewhere to go. In way too many systems, it goes out the pop safety valve onto the floor and gets replaced as soon as the heat timer says, oh, it's nice out, let the water cool down now. It gets replaced, the water shrinks, and new water from the street comes in with new oxygen, which corrodes the boilers. And only the oxygen part of the air dissolved in the water attacks the boilers. The nitrogen part is inert, so that forms bubbles in the heaters on the top, and those people call the heat complaint line no heat. And so then you overheat the whole building to give those people like a radiant floor heating. So like, because the radiators aren't working, so you have to overheat the rest of the building just so some heat will just kind of migrate up to them. So to solve that problem, you put expansion tanks, put more of them, put bigger ones of them, and they need to be pumped up with compressed air to the pressure in the system. They come from the factory with 12 pounds, which is good for one-story building. But in New York, we don't have one-story buildings, so you need to pump up with an air compressor. Really, really hard to get the contractors to do. And in a flood, they float up. It's the only thing in the boiler room that's light enough to float. And here's the pipe. So it's sort of dangling by the copper pipe. And we sort of just wrestled with it a little bit and let it fall on the floor in a controlled manner so it wouldn't hurt somebody. First is the worst thing, or fall. These are gas pipes here. We didn't want it falling on a gas pipe and breaking a gas pipe. So we knocked it onto the floor, and then when we came back later, the pipe had snapped. And so we changed it for two smaller ones because it was, we checked it and it had no compressed air in it. The rubber bladder in there had broken. Maybe they never filled it with air when it was installed. So these are new. These are the cheaper ones. They're not the super thick, super duper rated ones. So these we have on the list, like what we should do is put these higher up. I'll show you pictures later. But to make the building more resilient against damage in the future, put these higher up off the floor. So here's one of the 4 boilers that heats that building. It's the regular cheapo atmospheric gas type boiler. Atmospheric means the gas fire burns out here, sort of open to the atmosphere. If you stand there, you can see the flame. Atmospheric gas is nice because it's reliable and cheap. It's not nice in the sense that because it's wide open and air just moves through the boiler by gravity, when the fire's on, it just by draft moves through. Problem is cold air moves through. Lots of cold air through the boiler and up the chimney all the hours that the fire's not on, but yet the boiler's hot. And because these boilers are all piped together, they all stay hot all winter. So the brochure says, oh, get this thing where you have the boilers in a row, so if you only need a little heat, you only turn one boiler on. Yeah, but the one boiler is heating the other 4, which are being cooled by the 70-foot tall chimney. But they are reliable and they are cheap. So what we had to change was the gas valve, the spark igniter, and underneath is the pilot burner. It's a little $30 part. To buy the spark box is about $100, $80 or $100. The gas valve's about $130, $150. And you can buy a kit with the wiring harness and the pilot burner and everything for about $250 and rebuild this whole thing. The pilot burner is metal and it has a fire burning in it many hours. You think, well, water can't hurt that. I don't know why, but when you don't change them, the spark box gives you error codes. It says it's grounded, it's not right. I guess a little film of dirt on it lets it get grounded a little wrong or something, and it won't light. Or it might work today and you'll get a call in 3 hours, it's off. So after a flood, change the spark box, the gas valve, and the pilot burner. We did that on these, and we started them up, and then we're working on the next one, making the final connections, and the one that we started 3 minutes ago shut off. So we got them each started in a row, and they were shutting off right behind us. These transformers, which worked fine for about 3 minutes, stopped working. So one thing we discovered is a lot of the electronic or electrical components worked for a few hours, a few minutes, a few days, but almost everything had to be changed later on. A lot of our buildings have motorized burners. There's an electric motor with a fan to push air through the boiler. And these are nice because when they're off, the fire's off, but the boiler's hot, the chimney doesn't suck very much cold air through because the passageways in the boiler are narrow and need a fan to push the air through, so the chimney draft doesn't pull a lot through. Unfortunately, they have a computer that's $1,000. They have an airflow switch, $100. They have a gas pressure regulator and 2 gas valves. The newer ones, the regulators built in the valves, but you still have many hundreds of dollars worth of equipment right here. You have a pilot gas burner, pilot valve, and regulator. This purple thing is the electric guy to look at the fire. There's a couple $100. The ignition transformer is $100. So you have about 9